The German Schutztruppe had never been defeated in Africa. They had the best weapons, the best training, and the arrogance of empire behind them. But on August 17, 1891, in a valley called Lugallo, one African chief would change everything. His name was Mkwawa, and he was about to give the German Empire the shock of its life. This is the story of how Chief Mkwawa Munyigumba Mwamuyinga, known as Mkwawa, meaning conqueror of many lands, turned German East Africa into a nightmare for colonial administrators. For 7 years, this Hehe chief would outfight, outthink, and outlast the mighty German war machine. His first victory was so complete, so devastating, that it became known as the German Schutztruppe's first major defeat in Africa. Subscribe now, because you're about to witness one of colonial history's greatest military upsets. By 1891, the German Empire was carving up East Africa like a Christmas turkey. Their weapon of choice? The Schutztruppe, colonial forces armed with modern Mauser rifles, machine guns, and absolute confidence in European superiority. Leading the charge into the interior was Commissioner Emil von Zelewski. His mission: establish German authority over the rebellious Hehe people. The Germans had good reason to be worried. Mkwawa had accumulated power through war and intimidation of his enemies. The Hehe territory expanded greatly northwards in the early 1880s. While European powers squabbled over maps in Berlin, Mkwawa was building something unprecedented: a centralized African military state that controlled crucial trade routes between the coast and interior. "This Mkwawa fellow needs to be dealt with," Zelewski reportedly told his officers. Little did he know he was walking into a trap set by one of Africa's most brilliant military minds. Let's meet the man who would humble an empire. Mkwawa Munyigumba Mwamuyinga was born around 1855. As a young child, he was named Ndeselasi, meaning troublemaker. The future chief inherited more than just a throne from his father, Chief Munyigumba, who died in 1879. He inherited a military tradition that had been perfecting the art of warfare for generations. The Hehe weren't just another tribal group. They were a sophisticated military society. Their warriors fought with traditional spears and shields, but they also understood something the Germans didn't. Mkwawa had spent the 1880s expanding Hehe territory, defeating neighboring groups, and studying the strengths and weaknesses of his enemies. When German traders started appearing in his territory, Mkwawa was already analyzing their military capabilities. Chief Mkwawa was shocked to hear about the Germans' military might. The Germans also were worried about Chief Mkwawa. August 1891. Commissioner Zelewski was getting impatient. Reports kept coming in about this defiant Hehe chief who refused to submit to German authority. In July 1891, the German commissioner Emil von Zelewski led a battalion of soldiers, 320 askaris with officers and porters, to suppress the Hehe 320 men. Modern weapons, European officers, against what the Germans assumed was a primitive African tribe. Zelewski was marching his men straight into the most perfectly executed ambush in East African history. Mkwawa had chosen his ground carefully: the valley at Lugallo, steep hills on both sides, limited escape routes, perfect for what the chief had in mind. Lugallo is a village in Tanzania near Iringa, which in 1891 was the site of a battle in which a German colonial military force under Emil von Zelewski was decisively defeated and almost annihilated by the Hehe army of Chief Mkwawa. But here's what made Mkwawa's plan genius. He didn't just rely on superior numbers or terrain advantage. He studied German military doctrine and found its fatal weakness. The Germans expected conventional warfare: line formations, frontal assaults, predictable tactics. Mkwawa was about to give them something else entirely. August 17, 1891, 7 a.m. Zelewski's column marched into the Lugallo Valley, confident and completely unprepared. Suddenly, the hills erupted. On 17th August, they were attacked by Mkwawa's 3,000-strong army at Lugallo, who, despite only being equipped with spears and a few guns, quickly overpowered the Germans and killed Zelewski. 3,000 Hehe warriors against 320 German-led troops. But this wasn't a chaotic tribal charge. This was coordinated military tactics that would make Clausewitz proud. Mkwawa's forces attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. Warriors poured down from the hills, while others emerged from concealed positions. The German advantage in firepower meant nothing when they couldn't establish clear fields of fire. Spears and shields closed the distance faster than rifles could reload. Within hours, the German force was annihilated. Commissioner Zelewski, dead. Most of his officers, dead. The survivors fled in terror, carrying news of an impossible defeat. "The natives have modern weapons!" was the panicked report reaching German headquarters. Wrong. They had something better. Superior leadership. The news of Lugallo sent shockwaves through German East Africa. A European colonial force had been completely destroyed by African resistance. The German response was swift and overwhelming. They couldn't let this defeat stand. Colonial authority depended on the myth of European invincibility. On 28 October 1894, the Germans, under the new commissioner, Colonel Freiherr Friedrich von Scheele, attacked Mkwawa's fortress at Kalenga. Although they took the fort, Mkwawa managed to escape 3 years of preparation. Massive reinforcements, artillery bombardment. The Germans threw everything they had at Kalenga Fortress, and Mkwawa simply disappeared. This wasn't surrender. This wasn't defeat. This was the beginning of a guerrilla war that would last 7 more years. Subsequently, Mkwawa conducted a campaign of guerrilla warfare, harassing German forces throughout the region. The chief had studied the Germans long enough to understand their weakness. They needed to control territory to maintain colonial authority. But you can't control territory when your enemy refuses to stand still. For 7 years, Mkwawa turned southern Tanganyika into a German nightmare. Supply convoys attacked and destroyed. Isolated garrisons overrun. German-appointed chiefs assassinated. Colonial administrators living in constant fear. "We cannot find this Mkwawa anywhere, yet he strikes everywhere," one frustrated German officer wrote home. The chief had transformed from a traditional ruler into something new. A guerrilla commander who understood both traditional African warfare and modern military strategy. He was fighting a 20th century insurgency with 19th century weapons, and winning July 19, 1898, after 7 years of making the German Empire look foolish. The Germans thought they had finally cornered the elusive chief. They were wrong. Mkwawa had one final victory to claim: the right to die as a free man. Rather than give his enemies the satisfaction of capture, Chief Mkwawa Munyigumba Wamuyinga took his own life. On his own terms, in his own land, unbowed and unbroken. The Germans celebrated, claiming they had defeated Mkwawa. But here's the truth: they never caught him. For 7 years, this African chief had outmaneuvered every German strategy. He vanished when they expected him to fight. He attacked when they thought he was hiding. He survived when they were certain they had him trapped. The Germans didn't defeat Mkwawa. They simply outlasted him. And even in death, this remarkable man would continue to astound his enemies. When German colonial authorities examined Mkwawa's body, they made an extraordinary decision. They removed his skull and shipped it to Germany for scientific study. Why? Because German scholars couldn't believe an African could have outsmarted their military for 7 years. They wanted to study the brain of the man who had made fools of the German Empire. Think about that for a moment. The colonial power that claimed African inferiority was so impressed by Mkwawa's intelligence that they wanted to study his very skull and use it as a sign of victory as well. The ultimate admission that this African chief was a genius. Here's where Mkwawa's story becomes absolutely incredible. After Germany's defeat in World War I, the return of Mkwawa's skull became a diplomatic issue at the Treaty of Versailles. A village chief's remains had become part of international law. Think about that. The leaders reshaping Europe after World War I had to negotiate about returning an African chief's skull. That's the level of respect Mkwawa had earned. The British, now controlling former German East Africa, demanded its return to Tanzania. But it took until 1954, 56 years after his death, before Mkwawa's remains finally came home. Today, you can visit Chief Mkwawa's skull at the Mkwawa Memorial Museum in Kalenga, near Iringa, Tanzania. The same fortress where he made his final stand now houses his remains and tells his incredible story. Even from the grave, this chief was still making European powers jump through hoops. But let's talk about what Mkwawa actually achieved in those 7 extraordinary years. Battle after battle, this man outfought the German war machine. Lugallo wasn't a lucky victory. It was the opening move of a chess match Mkwawa had been planning for years. For 7 years, German commanders went to sleep wondering, where will Mkwawa strike next? For 7 years, German reinforcements poured into East Africa just to contain one African chief. For 7 years, the superior European military couldn't capture one man. Mkwawa didn't just resist colonialism. He made it expensive, embarrassing, and exhausting. So let's be clear about what Chief Mkwawa Mwamuyinga actually was. He was a military genius who defeated European forces using superior tactics and intelligence. He was a strategic mastermind who turned one victory into a 7-year war of resistance. He was a leader so formidable that his enemies wanted to study his brain after death. He was a man of such courage that he chose death over surrender. He was a symbol so powerful that world leaders negotiated about his remains decades later. Most importantly, he was undefeated. The Germans never captured him. They never broke his spirit. They never made him surrender. Mkwawa died as he lived, free, defiant, and on his own terms. Today, when military historians study guerrilla warfare, they study Mkwawa's campaigns. When African leaders speak of resistance, they invoke Mkwawa's name. When scholars discuss African military innovation, they point to Mkwawa's tactics. Intelligence, courage, and determination can overcome any advantage your enemy thinks they have. That's Chief Mkwawa's gift to history. He didn't just fight the German Empire, he schooled them. He didn't just resist colonialism, he humiliated it. He didn't just die a hero, he lived as one. Chief Mkwawa Mwamuyinga, the conqueror of many lands, including the minds of those who thought they could never be conquered. That's the power of true leadership. It outlasts empires. If this incredible story of African military genius inspired you, smash that subscribe button. Comment below. What impressed you most about Chief Mkwawa's resistance strategy? Next week, how Queen Nzinga of Angola made the Portuguese Empire beg for peace treaties. Hit that notification bell, because African history is full of leaders who refused to be conquered. Chief Mkwawa never surrendered, never gave up, never stopped fighting. He proved that true strength isn't measured by the weapons you carry. It's measured by the courage in your heart and the intelligence in your mind. The Germans took his skull to study his genius. We should study his example to understand what real leadership looks like. That's Chief Mkwawa, the man who made an empire tremble. Thanks for watching, and remember, the greatest victories come from refusing to accept defeat.